right now we're going to have a very, very interesting dialogue. I'm going to actually ask my friend and AREI trustee Paul Watson to join us. Maybe he already has. If we can get him in, that would be great. But he's coming in from Paris, France. Paul couldn't make it to AREDAY because, well, I'm going to let you tell your own story, Paul. Why don't we just say hello and welcome to AREDAY.
Well, thank you. Do I have audio now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, my apologies for not being able to come to AREDAY because I can't return to the U.S. without being detained because Japan has me on the Interpol red notice on the charge of conspiracy to trespass on a whaling ship. You know, like the red notice is set up for serial killers, war criminals, and major drug traffickers, and I'm the only person in the history of Interpol to be put on there for conspiracy to trespass. But that's because we drove them out of the Southern Ocean and shut down their illegal whaling operations, and Japan's a powerful country. But it was a small price to pay in order to keep the Southern Ocean whale sanctuary free of their criminal activities, which hopefully they'll stay out. So that's why I'm now in France, because I'm working on leaving in a month and a half to oppose the super trawlers operating off the coast of France and off the coast of Ireland. These are ships, giant ships, 200, 220 feet long, that set nets that can bring in with one load about 4 school buses full of fish, and incredible wasteful on their bycatch. Last year we documented them dropping 100,000 blue whiting because they simply wasn't a target species, so they just threw them overboard. Extremely destructive, and we're hoping to block them and stop their operations in November, and then we'll be returning to Iceland to block the Icelandic whaling operations next June. So that's our agenda for the next year.
That's fantastic, Paul. And the reality is that you have recently started a new foundation because apparently you had a mutiny on the good ship Sea Shepherd, I guess. And so unfortunately that forced you to create a new outfit, but it's so good to see how quickly you have redeployed and are now actively coming between the harpoon and the whale.
Yes, it was a bit of a shock last year because that was a hostile takeover of the organization that I founded in 1977, and so after 45 years, they threw me out. The reason being, they said I was too controversial and too confrontational, and I guess I was standing in the way of the organization going mainstream, which is something I didn't want to do. But that's a result of success, because we did the Whale Wars show and we got a lot of people supporting us, and therefore then we got a lot of people in administration who now had nice jobs, and I was too controversial for them. So they called it the Watson problem, and the way they solved it was just to move me out. But I set up the Captain Paul Watson Foundation and Neptune's Pirates, and we're growing strong. We have 1 ship now, 2 smaller vessels, and we're working on getting a second ship. So we're rebuilding the Navy, and we'll be out there. Well, we have been out there, and we'll continue to be out there interfering with illegal operations, everything from illegal fishing to whaling to the killing of seals and the killing of dolphins. And so we're growing strong every day.
Well, that's excellent. So glad. And maybe before we get into our talk today, which is focused around the economics of extinction, you can give us a little bit of a quick refresher. I know that you started off your career up in Canada, coming between the sealers and their clubs, and then I believe you went on to be one of the founders of Greenpeace, and maybe you can just quickly walk us forward up until today on your good work.
Well, I'll try and be brief, but I actually started when I was 10 years old. I spent the summer in eastern Canada, where I live, swimming with a family of beavers. And then the next summer I went back, and all the beavers were gone. And I found out trappers had taken them during the winter. That made me quite angry. So that winter, I walked the trap lines when I was 11 years old to free the animals from the traps and to destroy the traps. And I guess I've been doing the same thing for the last 60 years. I ran off to sea. I was in the Norwegian, Swedish Merchant Marine, the Canadian Coast Guard, and then I was one of the co-founders of Greenpeace in 1972. And then I left Greenpeace in 72 because I don't really agree with the, bearing witness, in other words, hanging banners and taking pictures as animals are being killed. So my falling out with Greenpeace is because I was a campaign leader for the seal campaign, and a man was about to kill a seal with a club, and I rushed forward, grabbed the club, threw it into the water, and took the seal in my arms and took it to safety. And Greenpeace accused me of theft and vandalism. I stole the man's club and vandalized it. And I said, well, look, I saved the seal's life. That's what I was there for. So I set Sea Shepherd up to be a direct intervention group. And I set it up with a specific strategy, which I called aggressive nonviolence. We're going to aggressively intervene, but we're not going to hurt anybody. And in my entire career, over 45 years, we've never caused an injury to anybody, but we have shut down hundreds and hundreds of illegal activities, fishing, whaling, sealing, pollution. And so it's a good strategy. It works quite well, and it operates within the boundaries of practicality and the law. So it was successful, but I think maybe too successful for some people, and they decided that I was no longer welcome.
Thanks for your years of dedication and commitment to life on planet, and particularly sea life. I know the last time we caught up in AREDAY, I think it was in 18 or 19, the small porpoise down in Mexico that's being slaughtered, well, that's almost extinct because of the Catawba. Can you give us an update on that? Are there any left at all?
There's about 8 to 10 that are left. Now, here's the problem. Because Sea Shepherd USA is involved in that, I'm forbidden legally to even talk about it because it's apparently their project. So I can't really comment on it, unfortunately. But there are certainly the Vaquita are in trouble, and their population is plummeted from under 1,000 down to just 8 now over the last 20 years.
It's so tragic when all of a sudden a species extinction becomes a political football, and in this instance, in the nonprofit world. I mean, please, give me a break, okay? So anyway, you guys get the sense of what Captain Paul's been up to here. And before we go into our conversation, which will be very dynamic, Paul, when you came to AREDAY, I asked you to tell the story about the whale, and I'm going to ask you again to maybe just to do a brief version of that, because it's such a stunning and poignant story of the sperm whale. And also, to put it in context, she was here the day before yesterday, and she's making a film called The Whale Lagoon. And there's a beautiful moment where a mother brings the baby up to the boat, and she leans over and hugs the whale, and the whale takes that in. And it's just, there's a connection there. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that connection in your own experience.
Well, I don't think you can look into the eye of a whale and not be changed. It has a dramatic impact. And my story was in June of 1975 when I was with Greenpeace, and we came up with this idea to protect the whales by we were reading a lot of Gandhi at the time, and we thought that all we had to do was put our bodies between the harpoons and the whales, and they wouldn't fire. And so Robert Hunter and I found ourselves in a small little boat in front of a Soviet harpoon vessel that was operating in the Pacific. And in front of us were 8 magnificent sperm whales that were fleeing for their life. And every time the harpooner tried to take a shot, I would maneuver the boat to block his aim. And this worked for about 20 minutes until the captain on the Soviet vessel came running down the catwalk and screamed into the ear of the harpooner, and then pointed down towards us, brought his finger across his throat and smiled. And that's when I realized Gandhi wasn't really going to work that day. And a few moments later, there was this horrendous explosion. The harpoon flew over our head and slammed into the backside of a female in the pod. It's an explosive harpoon, and there's blood everywhere. She rolled on her side. And suddenly the largest whale in the pod rose up, slapped the water with his tail, and dove. And he swam right underneath of us and threw himself straight up under the water, straight at the harpooner on the Soviet vessel to protect his pod. And they knew he was going to do this, so they had an unattached harpoon ready and fired it point blank and hit this whale in the head. And he fell back into the water, thrashing about, blood everywhere. And as he was thrashing about in agony, I caught his eye, and he suddenly stopped and dove again. And I saw a trail of bloody bubbles coming at us real fast. And he came up and out of the water at an angle so that the next move would come down right on top of us and crush us. And as his head rose up out of the water and his eye was right there, the size of my fist, so close I could see my reflection in his eye, I saw something that profoundly changed my life, and that was understanding. The whale understood what we were trying to do because I could see the effort he made to pull himself back, and his body began to slide into the sea. His eye disappeared beneath the surface, and he died. Could have killed us, and chose not to. So I owe my life to that whale. But also, I saw something else in that eye: pity, not for himself, but for us, that we could take life so thoughtlessly, so mercilessly. And why were the Russians killing these whales? They didn't eat them. They killed sperm whales for spermaceti sperm oil, which was highly prized for lubricating high heat-resistant machinery. And one of the things that was most valued for was in the construction and maintenance of intercontinental ballistic missiles. And I said to myself, here we are destroying this incredibly intelligent, socially complex, self-aware, sentient being for the purpose of making a weapon meant for the mass extermination of human beings. And that's when it hit me. We're insane. And I said right from then on, I'm going to do what I'm going to do for them. They're going to be my clients, not people, them. And that's what I've done for the last 50 years.
Wow. Well, deep appreciation to you, Paul. And now you and I have been in deep dialogue for, well, quite a number of years now. But particularly lately, we've been sort of, I think, bemused by the fact that we're forcing this sixth great extinction event, 8 billion humans, and why are we doing it? Why are we doing it? Because of the insatiable lust for money, and to hoard that money, and the money comes out of the resources of the planet, and we can point to various corporations, but let's just talk about the economics of extinction, shall we? How do you see that? Why are we not doing what's necessary to not only save ourselves as a human species from the collapse of the biosphere that we're forcing, but we're also sweeping the seas clean in the doing?
Well, I think it's very simple. Scarcity translates into higher demand, which translates into higher prices. And so the more scarce a commodity is, the more valuable it is. In this case, the more scarce the species, the more valuable it becomes. So there's literally people are investing in extinction, and that is short-term investment for short-term gain. And for instance, let's take a look at the bluefin tuna example. We've wiped out 90% of them, but the fishery still continues. And right now, Mitsubishi alone has probably 10 to 15 years supply of bluefin tuna frozen in their warehouses in Japan. They could continue to provide bluefin tuna to their customers, I guess, for the next 10 to 15 years without having to catch another bluefin tuna. But they won't do it. And the reason they won't do it is because they know that if the bluefin tuna population begins to rise, as it rises, the value of the commodity, the ones that they have in the warehouse, goes down. And if the bluefin tuna goes extinct, what they have in the warehouse now becomes a priceless commodity. They can set any price. It's already the most expensive fish on the planet. One bluefin tuna can go for $75,000 per fish, and some of them are sold in the Japanese market for over $1 million. So it's there's a lot of money being made out of it. And as a result, bluefin tuna populations have been diminished severely. That's one of the reasons orcas are starving in the Mediterranean, for instance. And and this actually carries on to almost every fishery on the planet. Almost every single commercial fishery right now is in a state of economic collapse. And we're wiping out one species after another and constantly adapting to diminishment. As we remove one species, we just move on to another species. Orange roughy used to be big in supermarkets and in fish stores and in restaurants back in the 1990s. You don't hear about it anymore because this is a fish that takes 45 years to become sexually mature and lives to be 200 years of age. It cannot keep up with the demand as compared to a salmon, which takes 4 years to become sexually mature and dies. So we treat all fish as fish when in fact every single species is unique in their own way. And I was raised in a fishing village in eastern Canada. And I remember when turbot and pollock and these fish were considered garbage. That's what the fishermen called them, garbage, because nobody really wanted them. But now that the turbots of fish you can buy now in a restaurant in Paris and New York, it was unthinkable in the 60s or 70s, but we've adapted to that diminishment. We also didn't eat mussels. Mussels were considered dirty because they grew on the piles, on the wharves and everything. And yet now you go to my hometown and you don't get the scallops, you don't get the clams, you get mussels. And again, it's this constant adaptation to diminishment.
Yeah, and lobster also was considered a trash fish during the Depression. Nobody wanted to eat it. You know, I grew up on Cape Cod. I don't like it, but you know, it still is you know. So that's a good case in point. Well, listen.
Well, you could tell actually. You could tell in my hometown. You could tell the poor kids. We were the ones who went to school with lobster sandwiches on homemade bread, desperately trying to trade them for bologna on Wonder Bread, which we thought was exotic.
Rather have bologna than lobster any day, right? Well, that's a lot of baloney, it sounds like to me. So, well, Captain Paul, you know, it's been quite a long time since we first met, and I'll just remind you that I went to a party down in New Orleans. It was a year after the oil spill, and you were there, and you were in your captain's suit, as I recall. Kevin Costner had just performed, and there was some kind of a party that we went to. But the point is that we were there to recognize the 1-year anniversary from the Deepwater Horizon, which devastated the Gulf of Mexico and killed untold amounts of cetaceans. I understand that there was an island where they were bringing the carcasses offshore and they were burning them, but they were hiding it, just like they put Corexit all over that oil and sunk it down to the bottom of the sea to kind of sweep it under the rug, so to speak, so people couldn't see it. But still, the effects of that oil spill still haunt the Gulf of Mexico today. So in terms, again, of the economics of extinction, and this insatiable lust for oil, not only for seafood products, but for oil, largely, much of which comes from the ocean, out of the ocean, underneath the ocean and the North Sea and down in the Gulf of Mexico. How do you see that factoring into the over-acidification of the ocean, and also to the buildup of the mercury and all the life in the sea? How is that playing out through the perspective of the Watson Foundation?
Well, you know, there's 2,000 wellheads in the Gulf of Mexico, and the deeper they go, the more dangerous it is for another spill. There will be more spills, of course, but we will go to the ends of the earth to get to the last drop of oil, if you know, to make a profit. That's what the oil companies, they're insatiable. And it doesn't matter what kind of damage they cause in order to get that. And again, as oil resources become diminished, the price will go up, and therefore, for instance, like the tar sands in Canada were considered uneconomical until the price of oil went to a certain level, and then it became okay to go in and make a profit from them. But the ocean is threatened by so many things, not just oil, but plastic pollution, sonic pollution from surveying and sonic testing. There's talk about windmills. Windmills don't kill whales, but the building of the windmills create sounds up to 200 decibels, which actually can kill whales. So we don't think too much about that. But the other problem that we have, and I think the most serious problem that we have, is since 1950, there's been a 40% diminishment in phytoplankton populations in the sea. Phytoplankton provides up to 70% of the oxygen in the air we breathe and sequesters enormous amounts of CO2. If phytoplankton disappears from the ocean, we die. We do not live on this planet without phytoplankton. Far more important than the forests of the world, which provide 30%. Phytoplankton is absolutely essential, and it's also the foundation of the food pyramid, going up from fishes to the great whales. And one of the reasons that phytoplankton is being diminished is because we're diminishing the populations of whales and dolphins and seabirds and fishes. And they provide the nutrients for the phytoplankton, the magnesium, the iron, and the nitrogen, which comes in the form of their fecal material. Every day, one blue whale defecates 3 tons onto the surface of the ocean, which is filled with the nutrients that's absolutely essential for phytoplankton. So whales, in a way, are the farmers of the ocean, and their crop is phytoplankton. And for the most part, people aren't even aware that phytoplankton is in the ocean, but it is one of the most essential groups of plant species on the planet. And without it, we just simply can't survive. So to me, I think the greatest problem facing the future is diminishment of diversity. There are three basic laws of ecology. The first is the law of diversity, that the strength of an ecosystem is dependent upon the diversity within it. The second is the law of interdependence, that all species within an ecosystem are interdependent with each other. And the third is the law of finite resources. There's a limit to growth, a limit to carrying capacity. And when we steal the carrying capacity of other species, that causes diminishment in both diversity and interdependence. And that's what's happening right now. And, I said at the 2015 climate conference in Paris, the best thing we can do to address climate change is to leave the ocean alone. Let's have a moratorium on commercial, heavily industrialized fishing for the next 75 years. Let's allow the ocean to repair the damage that we've done to it. And it will. The ocean can be resilient if we just leave it alone. And I don't think we're going to do that because too much money, of course, is being made from commercial fisheries. But that is the only solution, really. I like to look at it this way. If you consider the Earth as a spaceship, which is what it is, we're on this incredible voyage around the Milky Way galaxy at incredible speeds. And every spaceship has a life support system that provides us with everything we need. It provides the oxygen in the air we breathe. It provides the food we eat. It regulates climate and temperature. And that life support system is operated, maintained by a crew of engineers. The engineers keep everything going. And we humans, now we're not engineers, we're passengers. We're having a wonderful time entertaining ourselves. But what we're doing is we're murdering the engineers. We're killing them off. And there's only so many of those engineers that you can kill before the machinery begins to break down. If we lose the worms, if we lose the bees and the trees and the whales, those are the engineers that keep that life support system going. And if we lose them, then, the passengers are going to go down with the ship also.
Well, we've got to make sure that we don't do that, and that's why we have the AREDAY to discuss the solutions. But we have to identify the problem in order to understand what the solutions are. And so thanks for helping us do that. Now back to the phytoplankton. I do understand that 2 out of 3 breaths that we breathe come from the phytoplankton, and that in fact that is the engine of photosynthesis on the planet Earth. And then later on, the trees evolved, if we go back 4 billion years or what have you. Now, today, we have a situation where as the oil companies begin to lose market share and don't sell as many gallons of gasoline as they used to due to the increase of electric vehicles, they're starting to look at putting up more plastic manufacturing facilities. And we know that the plastic is starting to penetrate everywhere in the world, including down at the depths of the Basel Ocean. They're finding it down there. But they're also, I understand, finding that the plastic is penetrating, the microplastic is penetrating the singular cellular phytoplankton. And I'm wondering if you looked into this and understand what the potential effects of this literally solid oil spill, which is what the plastic actually is, what does that mean to this engine of photosynthesis?
Well, microplastics, of course, are a poison, and they get into the bodies of zooplankton. And anybody eats fish has got microplastic in their bodies. It's an insidious, creeping disease. It's a design flaw. I mean, we should never have produced plastic in the first place. I mean, there are uses for plastic, but single-use plastic, well, what's the point of that? It's just incredibly wasteful, incredibly destructive. And it comes from sources that we don't even think about. For instance, driving down the road with your car, every time you do it, tiny pieces of the tire go off onto the street, and that's washed down into the ocean. A recent study in Norway found that a good 40% of the microplastics off the Norwegian coast was from automobile tires. And so it comes from all sorts of sources that we don't even visualize or think about. And the solution, we've got to stop producing plastic. It's as simple as that. I used to walk the beaches when I was 8 and 10 years old in Eastern Canada. Back then in the 50s, you could walk the beach for miles and miles and not see a single piece of plastic. We can exist without plastic. We used to find fish floats made of glass, and all the lobster traps are made of wood and hemp. All of these things were biodegradable. So we can survive very well without having to have plastic. We don't need it.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more on that. And in terms of going forward into the future, Paul, what are the plans for you all over there at the Captain Paul Watson Foundation? I know that you have one large boat, thanks to John Paul DeJoria, and but what's happening looking forward?
Well, we got two small boats, and we're going to get a second larger vessel. But I think that everybody has the ability to change things. Everybody has the ability to make a significant difference. The strength of an ecosystem is in diversity. Therefore, the strength of a movement is in diversity. And it doesn't matter whether that approach is education, litigation, legislation, or direct intervention or activism. It all works towards the same end. So I just encourage people to say, what are your skills? What are your abilities? How can you put those to work to make this a better planet? And all working together and agreeing to disagree on tactics maybe, but agreeing on what the problem is and how to address it. A lot of people get a little depressed and a little pessimistic, saying, well, you know, it's hopeless, it's an impossible problem to solve. But I've always felt that the answer to an impossible problem is to find the impossible solution. And I think that that can be found through the application of courage, passion, and imagination and determination. 1972, the very idea that Nelson Mandela would be president of South Africa was unthinkable, and it was impossible. And yet that impossibility became a possibility. So I think that that's true of almost every problem that we have to face, is to make the impossible possible. And people can do that. I mean, look what, because of Diane Fossey, we have mountain gorillas in Rwanda. Because of David Wingate, we have storm petrels in Bermuda. Look what Greta Thunberg's been able to do, and how many people she's been able to reach, one person. So each and every one of us has that potential, that capacity to really significantly change the world.
Well, you heard it there, folks, and every single one of us has got to stand up and stand with Captain Paul. Now, with the remaining few minutes that we have, Paul, can we talk a little bit about how you see the politics playing out? There's going to be a COP number 28 in Dubai, which is a dubious place to have this since they produce so much oil, right? And then, but I understand next year in Brazil, and I want to also recognize that we're having this conversation on Indigenous Day. And here at AREDAY, it's Indigenous and Women's Day. And so we've been having a focused conversation on both the indigeneity of our planet, the importance of that, and also the leadership of women. So let's talk a little bit in the few closing minutes here about how we can honor the remaining biosphere, that's the indigenous territories, lands, reservations, and preserves, stand between humanity and this remaining nature.
I think one of the most important things that we can get from indigenous cultures is the understanding of biocentrism, which is that we're part of everything. We're not better than everything. It wasn't all created for us. We're part of everything, and everything has to live in harmony. And most indigenous cultures had that belief. But over the last few thousand years, so-called civilized human beings came up with this anthropocentric concept. And almost every major religion is anthropocentric, which means that it was all created for us, it's all about us, and we're the most important species on the planet, and to hell with everything else. I mean, I got a call from Brett Hume, who was a Fox News journalist, and he said, "Did you say that trees, bees, worms, and whales are more important than people?" I said, "Yeah, I did say that." He said, "How could you say something so outrageous?" And I said, "Well, I said it because they're more important than people, for the very simple fact that they can live here without us, but we cannot live here without them. We need them. They don't need us." So we have to put this idea that we're better and more important and dominant over everything behind us, and accept the fact that we're all citizens, equal citizens on this planet. We all have to learn to live together. And also, one of the most important lessons that I ever learned was when I was in 1973, I volunteered as a medic for the American Indian movement during the occupation of Wounded Knee. And we were surrounded by about 3,000 federal agents who were shooting at us. They wounded 46, killed 2, and they were firing about 20,000 rounds a night into the village. And I went to Russell Means and I said, "Look, we do not have any hope of winning here. The odds against us are overwhelming. And so what are we doing? Why are we still here?" And he told me something that has stayed with me forever. And he said, Well, we're not concerned about the odds against us, and we're not concerned about winning or losing. We're here because this is the right place to be, the right time to do it, and the right thing to do. Don't worry about the future. Your power is in the present. Focus on the present. What you do in the present will define what the future will be. So I don't get depressed or I don't get pessimistic. I just put all my energies into doing things, activism in the present, and that will define what the future is. And whatever that future is, I have no idea, but all I can do and all anybody can do is really do what they can in the present to help make that future a good future for all of us, all species.
And with that, Captain Paul Watson, thank you so much for your leadership, your dedication, and your tremendous vision and heart. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Joe.